Meadows Foundation was founded in 1948 by Alger Meadows. He was an oil man who made his fortune here in Dallas. He started the foundation because he wanted to give back to the people who had made him so successful. During Al Meadows' lifetime, he was directly involved with a lot of nonprofits, and he gave his money to a number of different charities. When he died in 1978, he left his assets to the foundation, and my cousin Curtis took over as president.
We were getting a lot of requests from nonprofits asking for housing grants, and we thought, gee, if we could provide that housing, then maybe they would be able to use that money on programming. We got a telephone call from Dorothy Savage, who was then the president of the Historic Preservation League, who was fighting very, very hard to save what she said was one of the last remaining blocks of Victorian homes left in Dallas. So she asked us to go over and meet her on the front steps of one of the houses and do a tour of the block. I had seen restorations, and I had the idea that maybe these could be restored to what they look like, and wouldn't it be great to be able to preserve a whole block of those houses. And so the foundation's board had two main concerns. One, had I lost my mind? And two, were we all going to be safe?
In the late 70s, it was pretty much a mess. I mean, the house next door had burned. There were lots of vacant lots. It was not really considered a safe place to be. The park was not a beautiful park with a gazebo and landscaping. It was just a patch of grass. It was not what you would call a cozy neighborhood. At that point, the Historic Preservation League was still pretty small and had a very cohesive board, and we were, quite frankly, pretty cocky. We had, saved Swiss Avenue, we'd gotten a historic ordinance, we worked in Munger Place, and why couldn't we buy a block of houses? And we figured, worst case, we would resell them to people that with deed restrictions and save them that way, not have to hold them.
When we first got involved with this, the houses were falling down and in horrible disrepair, but they were the last group of Victorian homes in Dallas, and so the opportunity to restore them to their original glory was one I think we all were excited about.
We began to see early on in the construction period that we were going to have an opportunity to get that next block. And if you could put the two blocks together, you would be able to create a streetscape of Victorian life, from a park to a church to homes and houses that people lived in. And the idea began, if we could get control of the next block, which we did, then where would we go about finding the houses?
After watching so many houses being demolished in this area, it was sort of gratifying to see other orphan houses being saved by being moved in where they'd be protected for the future.
The Historic Preservation League, Virginia McAllister, and a number helped us find some of these houses. We had to pick them up and move them.
The Wilson block is really important because it's probably the most intact block of Queen Anne Victorians anywhere in the city of Dallas. And all of these are Queen Anne houses with wonderful high-pitched roofs and lots of shaped shingles and porches that wrap around. It was Frederick and Henrietta Wilson that built this. He was going to help his brother building the Wilson building downtown. They decided to build their own home. Before deed restrictions and before zoning, the only way to sort of control your neighborhood was to own it and develop it yourself. So he bought this whole block, built his home, a big playground for his children, and then 6 rental houses.
My challenge to the architects was, could you build for me these houses and restore them to what they looked like in the 1890s at or about the same cost as it would have cost us to build them new? And they did that.
Over the years, this project has evolved. We've gone from 1 block to 2 blocks to 22 acres. And we've even added a dog park, which has become the center of the community for many of the people in this area. We've housed about 38 nonprofit organizations in rent-free office space for a maximum of 10 years. Most all of our tenants over the years have grown, they've become stronger, and they've really thrived here.
The Wilson Block was listed on the National Register in 1978. And then in 1981, it became a City of Dallas landmark historic district. I think it's hard to overestimate the impact that restoring this area had on the city. It really became an anchor for a pretty derelict section of the city. It's important to recognize what a great national impact this area has had, because other cities looked to this as an example of what they could do.
I'm proud, number one, that we were able to restore them to what they look like. If you go back to what they looked like when we bought them, there was a big risk that we would not be able to get them back in a condition that would be something to be excited about. We'd always have to tear down our history in order to build something that is new and start our history all over again. Most of the houses of that period that remained in the area were all gray and white. When we restored the one that was burned out, and that was the first house that was restored, and they put this bright blue paint on it, the sky blue paint, and it just popped right off the street. It just grabbed you. I knew that we had something very, very special.
I think if the Meadows Foundation had not come along, these houses would have been torn down and it would have been developed like the rest of Bryan Place.
Really and truly, the tribute is to the nonprofits who live here, because we give them the space, but they're the ones who do the work, and they're the ones who are making the difference.
I used to think of it as like a diamond. You kept turning it over and there'd be a different facet, a different look, a different kind of thing that was there.
Other cities looked to this as an example of what they could do.
I often thought of it as my uncle's, like my uncle's art collection, which was now in the Dallas Museum of Art, and people would go by and they would see these wonderful paintings and everything. And I always thought of it as a canvas of houses that belonged to the city and the people that were there in it. And it was at that point, I think, that each time I would drive by, I would say, we did something pretty special here.
It's hard for me to believe that we haven't honored the Meadows Foundation for this project sooner. I mean, I guess it was so close to home and that we didn't think about it, but it is so appropriate for us to be giving them this award for this phenomenal project that's lasted so many years and with such high quality that it's just really not only appropriate, but superb honor.